Hello everyone. Today we are going to discuss Norma Frontalis. As early in the earlier classes, we were discussing the exterior of the skull and we have gone through the Norma occipitalis and Norma verticalis. Now today we are going to discuss Norma Frontalis. Now, definition part. Norma Frontalis, when we observe the skull, जब हम skull को देखते हैं anterior aspect से, so anterior aspect से जो हमें दिखता है that is the Norma Frontalis. Now, इसकी shape कैसी है? It is oval in shape. It is oval in shape and it is wider above than below. So the shape of this Norma Frontalis, it is oval shape, wider above and narrower below. Now, coming to the bones which contribute to this Norma Frontalis. So the bones that contribute are the frontal bone. This is the frontal bone which is unpaired. We have the two maxillary bones which are paired. We have the two nasal bones which are also paired. We have the two zygomatic bones which are also paired, and the mandible, which you are not able to see here, but mandible we'll see separately, we'll study separately, but it is a part of the Norma Frontalis. You should remember that. Now coming to the sutures. Now there are some sutures that are present within the Norma Frontalis. Now, first of all, we see a suture here. That is, this suture, this is known as the frontozygomatic suture. As you can see, it is present on the lateral orbital margin. This is the frontozygomatic suture. Now, this frontozygomatic suture is present between the zygomatic process of the frontal bone. You can see the zygomatic process of the frontal bone and the frontal process of the zygomatic bone. So this suture is known as the frontozygomatic suture, and I'll again repeat, it is present on the lateral orbital opening, lateral orbital margin. Now coming to the next suture, that is the frontomaxillary suture. This is the frontomaxillary suture. Now this frontomaxillary suture, it is a junction between the nasal part of the frontal bone. This is the nasal part of the frontal bone. So it is junction between the nasal part of the, so right now we are talking about the frontomaxillary suture. So frontomaxillary suture, it is junction between the nasal part of the frontal bone and the frontal process of the maxilla. Frontal process of the maxilla. Now if you can see this suture, जो हमारा suture है, it is present on the medial orbital margin. जैसे ये वाला सूचर हमारा लैटरल ऑर्बिटल मार्जिन पे था, ये हमारा मीडियल ऑर्बिटल मार्जिन पे है. उसके बाद जो नेक्स्ट सूचर है, दैट इज द फ्रंटोनेजल सूचर. दिस इज द फ्रंटोनेजल सूचर. नाउ दिस फ्रंटोनेजल सूचर, ये किसके बीच में है? इट इज द जंक्शन बिटवीन द नेजल पार्ट ऑफ द फ्रंटल बोन, नेजल पार्ट ऑफ द फ्रंटल बोन एंड द टू नेजल बोन्स. एंड जो यहाँ पे सूचर बनता है, दिस सूचर इज द फ्रंटोनेजल सूचर. आई विल अगेन रिपीट, आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट द फ्रंटोनेजल सूचर. ठीक है, इट इज द जंक्शन बिटवीन द फ्रंटल पार्ट ऑफ द नेजल बोन एंड द टू नेजल बोन्स. नाउ उसके बाद जो हमारी ये दो नेजल बोन्स है जो पेयर्ड है, जो हमारी नॉर्मा फ्रंटालिस में है, उनके बीच में जो सूचर है, दो नेजल बोन्स के बीच में ये जो सूचर है, दैट इज हमारा इंटरनेजल सूचर. उसके बाद और एक आता है हमारा जाइगोमेटिको मैक्सिलरी सूचर. एज द नेम सजेस्ट, ये हमारा जाइगोमेटिक बोन और मैक्सिलरी बोन के बीच में आएगा. सो ये एक ओब्लीक सूचर आप देख सकते हो, दैट इज रनिंग डाउनवर्ड्स एंड लैटरली. सो दिस इज नोन एज द जाइगोमेटिको मैक्सिलरी सूचर. सो where is the so it is between the junction between the maxilla and the zygomatic bone. So this is the zygomatic bone, this is the maxilla. इनके बीच में जो suture है, जिसको बोलते हैं हम zygomatic maxillary suture. As I said to you, it's an oblique suture. It runs downwards and laterally. उसके बाद the last suture है हमारा, that is the junction between the two maxilla. Junction between the two maxilla. It is known as the intermaxillary suture. So junction between the two maxilla is called the intermaxillary suture. इट इज़ ए मिड लाइन सूचर. एज यू कैन सी, ये हमारे मिड लाइन में है, जस्ट बिलो. ये हमारा आपको पता है कि दिस इज द एंटीरियर नेजल एपर्चर. जस्ट बिलो द एंटीरियर नेजल एपर्चर वी हैव दिस इंटरमैक्सिलरी सूचर. सो दैट्स ऑल अबाउट द सूचर्स.